Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that. And thank you for having me here. I'm Apoorv. I have been working on green buildings, specifically green building certification, for the last 15 years. At present, I work at US Green Building Council. I head our certification team for Lead for Cities and Communities. And I work on managing our peer program, which is for electrical infrastructure. In addition to all of this, I have been closely working on pushing the material space towards low carbon, circularity, and healthy materials. Thank you.
Sorry.
Very good evening, everyone. I'm Sandeep Chandna, and I represent Tech Mahindra. My story is quite long. In fact, it's a vintage now. 16 years as a Chief Sustainability Officer. I was brought in as a CSO when people were still confused what sustainability exactly meant, whether it was triple bottom line, shared value, or whether it was to look at people, profit, and environment. So from that perspective, yes means quite a vintage story. But as I stand today in front of you, or I sit in front of you today very proudly, I lead the world. So Tech Mahindra is the rated #1 company in the world on ESG. So very proudly sharing it with you. Thank you.
Hello. Greetings, everyone. I am Rinika Grover. I head sustainability and CSR with the Polo Group. When we talk about, the topic's pretty pertinent today that we're going to be talking about, which is on waste. So I just kind of highlight that part only within the organization because I lead sustainability globally. So we do look at waste management as one of the critical areas in terms of the environmental indicators. And within the CSR side also, we look after waste management, which is where we're working with the government. So both sides of the hats that I wear, we are looking at waste and specifically moving towards a waste-free future, hopefully. And that's what I thought I'll highlight. And rest, of course, we'll have some conversations over here. Thank you.
Tried and tested. Teaches us sustainability, one mic.
Absolutely. Great beginning, I would say. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Hitesh Mehta, and I represent Honeywell here as the leader for the advanced materials business for South Asia. Honeywell, as many of you might know, is a multi-business conglomerate, and we operate in different technology spaces and markets. But interesting to note is that a big focus of our technologies and our investments is towards sustainable technologies and sustainable solutions. Within my business in advanced materials, we do have products which work on reducing the greenhouse gases impact in terms of the refrigeration industry using the HFCs, and we are bringing in the new line of products in HFOs, which have a much lower global warming potential. We have products that help recycle plastic, and I think we'll talk more about it. Thank you so much.
Can I begin with you, Ms. Grover? What are the biggest challenges that businesses and individuals face in transiting to a zero waste future? And what are the learnings that you have had and how have you overcome it?
So I'll divide your question into two parts. But before I start, it's kind of really important to draw a picture in terms of the context setting, why we're talking about waste. It's great that we're talking about it today. It's a really pertinent topic, but I'm sure some of the factual information, if we like to portray in terms of putting why we're working on waste, some of the people over here would have already heard about it. I mean, there's a fact which says that, about 0.7 kilograms of per capita per waste per person that's generated. What's kind of a revolution or a challenge is that a significant percent of that is not processed. Moving on, when you look at the picture at a bird's eye view, and that's also, there was recently a report with World Bank which said that 70% of the waste, we're likely to increase by 2050 because of this population explosion. There's an increase. That means, obviously, when we're looking at waste generation, that's going to increase. That means our reliance on virgin material is also going to increase. which talks about that how when we the material extraction, when we're looking at how that has an impact on biodiversity loss. And the reason I talk about biodiversity loss is because we work massively in biodiversity as well. So 80% of the biodiversity is lost because of material extraction. So where the topic that we're talking about is huge. It's mammoth. It's not something very, very small. So it's very essential for businesses to even look at it in terms of as an overall piece of work. More importantly, I would say it adds consequence because the whole world, I mean, even we are, organization level, government level, everyone is talking about the NDCs and we're working towards net zero. So it's a huge fact that if we were to deal with the waste, we would reduce our global gas, GHG emissions by 20%. So it's a no-brainer for all organizations to kind of look at it from a larger, through a larger lens and see that there is an opportunity, not a challenge to look at it. Coming back to the challenges that you were talking about. When we talk about challenges overall, one key area is the reverse logistics side of it. So, of course, the infrastructure availability, and I'm talking from the tire industry point of view as well, because we've recently had this EPR law which has come into play. So that's one of the critical challenges. And when we're looking at the landfills, and it's a given, it's a no-brainer, because there is also this conversation going on that when biodegradable waste makes it to the landfill, there's methane, which is far more detrimental in global warming than carbon dioxide is. So it's really very, very essential to look at this in terms of the logistics and the reverse logistics part of it. The second one, which I'm sure the co-panelists will talk about, is your availability of technologies, which is basically recycling technologies. And here I have a particular example of plastic, and this is something we're looking at as well. When you look at plastic and you try and reprocess it, the kind of quality of plastic that it's reprocessed, it's not like for like, so it's always low graded. So that's the technology side of it where we experience challenge as well. And being in the tire industry, we ourselves are looking at how we can take it back, the reclaimed rubber or the rubber crumb back into the tire. And we're working towards that. There is a lot of work that's happening, but these are the challenges that I would say that one is experiencing. And the one which is most important is the consumer behavior. I mean, of course, all of us are looking at, very channels of our buying patterns have changed. We rely online and all that stuff. So obviously that is another area where there is a sensitization that's required as well. So I thought, I just highlight that. If you want, I can address the other side of the business as well, because we have a three-pronged approach in terms of what we could do. Do you want me to?
Please.
Okay. So when we're talking about, of course, I'm sure people will have, there'll be panelists who will come up with more challenges. I just thought I'll highlight only three. But the most important one, when we're looking at in terms of what businesses can do, of course, we have this legislation, but there is three areas where businesses can work on. We're talking about circular economy a lot recently, and we have this report which says that only 9% of the economy is circular, rest we still need to work towards it. So the three areas one we could look at is filling the loop, which is basically you're extending the resource efficiency where your per ton of production, per ton of product is more efficiently produced. So that's something what businesses could do, which is what we're looking at as well in-house. Second is closing the loop, which is more about how you can look at, and that's coming from the EPR or various corporates and various organizations have legislations where you're looking at what you can do so that you can actually use it back into your product mix, which is basically making it more circular. And the third one, which is really important, which is something which goes against the capitalist economy, is extending the loop, increasing the life cycle of the product to an extent where it's there for larger or a longer period in the economy to create the value in the economy. And that's one of the critical parts. And I just can talk about from the organization that I represent, we do work on the retreading based business as well massively, where when the product reaches its end of life, we look at retreading, and we have businesses over there where we can extend its life cycle. So that's something I thought I'd just highlight for you.
I come from the plastic industry, and मेरी plastic industry बदल रही है. You know, technologies are coming, and we can expect better quality of recycling the days ahead.
Yes.
And when you said of EPR, this is a danger word. What word? You know, we don't know. But you know, no one is going to spare us on the earth. And when I'm talking of EPR, you know, we also in the plastic industry first oppose it, but we fell in line. Like that same will happen to the tire industry. And going, it's not a, I'm not talking philosophy, but I'm saying something. You know, we are plastics burned, hated,
Totally.
you know, whatever kicked, but we are still there. And that EPR should transit to environment protection responsibility.
Totally.
You know, when we are talking of sustainability, it is more important.
It is, and I totally take your views on
Thank
that.
you. Sandeep ji, you have a rich experience of 16 years. And when we talk about this zero waste, how has this been done in your organization? And what are the learnings you can share with us?
Thanks, Samir. And Samir, before I go to that, you know, we were speaking about plastic. So if you recollect, or maybe you would have read about it, the plastics were there in 1911 sometime. And that time when this was invented, or when this really came into the existence, there was a kind of happiness, there was a kind of a gloom around all this. I think so where we have really gone wrong is the mismanagement.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this, as we draw more, yes, means there would be some challenges. So I think so there the aspect has to be more about innovation, that what is it that we bring about. Now coming back to my organization, Tech Mahindra, we started this journey quite early. In fact, looking at the waste, how do we really look at it? All my locations today are zero discharge facilities. That means not even a single drop of water goes outside the campus.
Wow.
That means the water that is used in washrooms, it is used for gardening purpose in most of the campuses, and it goes to vermicompost. So from that perspective, quite good. Then I have taken a target in the public domain saying that all my locations will be zero waste to landfill certified by 25-26, and I've already achieved about 60 to 70% of my
That's
targets.
remarkable.
Yeah. And now, how do we do this? Now, one is definitely your e-waste is a major challenge where a lot of regulations coming in, but still we have been able to survive. The major thing which is there is how do you bring awareness in the employees, saying that we just heard Capgemini saying they have about 180,000. Same, we have about 1.5 lakh people who are working with us. And so how do you really bring awareness in them, and looking at how do they really use in scope 3. So with this, I think so more or less we are quite meeting our net zero goals even in.
And how do the 150,000 people take it?
See, there are two parts to it again. Now, there was a time when we were still looking at, what is LCA, life cycle assessment. And today, every customer is asking about LCA. Is your product has a life cycle assessment or not? Does it have the requisite materials which are being required? So employees are now eco-design and green IT certified. So I'm making a public commitment that all my employees would be green IT and eco-design certified. So that means they will be aware of whatever they're coding or whatever they're writing. So that would be in a public domain saying, we know our business well.
Amazing. Thank you. Apoorv ji, you work in making things green and certifying them. So how has this journey, in certification I know, but what are the learnings while doing the certification about the zero waste, what you have seen in action?
So I incidentally come from construction largely, and that's the focus area. Within construction, from green building certification perspective, quite early, like since the early initial green building certifications came about globally, there had been some push towards circularity. There was always uh, buildings were encouraged to buy carpets or bricks or cement which had recycled content all the way since the beginning of 2000s. So there was always this push to bring a degree of circularity in, and different laws helped, but also the industries kind of pushed forward and brought that change within their products, because the entire green building movement was driving that change for them. And we, from a certification standard development body, we were ensuring that we keep pushing the bar so that the thresholds keep getting higher and higher. Now, where we are at this point, there is conversation about zero waste. One, of course, becomes how do you, like that was being talked about, how do you encourage people to generate less waste during regular operations? And then becomes diversion. But the other key aspect, which becomes quite unique for construction sector and where we kind of try and face slightly different challenges, is our time horizons are quite long. If a building is now built, that building won't be taken down for next 50 to 75 years. So the concrete or the steel or usually also the glass will have very long time spans. Even the internal air conditioning ducts would be like there for 15, 20 years. So it does not become something that can be implemented and results can be seen immediately. It comes over a long period. So then one step becomes this focus area, which is now coming slowly, is you encourage people to design for disassembly. Because we know that they might disassemble after 50 years, and who knows which one of us is there at that time. But at least at that time, recyclability or circularity becomes easier. So on one side, yes, there is push to say retain the existing buildings. If you can refurbish them and you don't need to buy new materials, that's good. You design for future disassembly, and then you also keep ensuring that the rest of the materials that are there, carpets, chairs, etc., whatever, have as high a recycled content as possible. And the good part that comes sometimes is that because companies which make these products are not going to make them only for the building sector or only for the green buildings. And green buildings, even the certified buildings, are maybe 1-2% of overall construction sector. But if the change comes within the materials, then that translates to the entire sector. For example, today, pretty much all glass you can buy has recycled content. That was driven by certification. But even if somebody wants to replace one window pane in their house, they'll be buying the same thing. So that becomes our approach of ensuring that we inspire people to kind of move towards that side, more of as much a carrot as possible.
Thank you. Hitesh ji, what are the most promising waste reduction and elimination technologies that can help us for a zero waste future?
So I would like to kind of, address it in a way that, getting to zero waste is an admirable goal, but there's a long distance that we need to travel. And I think it's an evolving area, especially with all large corporations having committed to net zero and most of them having a ESG roadmap. It's become really important to start taking note of what are the technologies available. And along with the technologies, I think I would say that ecosystem to support those technologies is also important. We can look at technologies largely in 3 buckets. How can you reduce? How can you reuse? And if reduce and reuse is not possible, then how can you dispose it in a more eco-friendly way that it does not cause further damage? So Honeywell, invests, as I mentioned, that almost 60% of our R&D is invested in developing sustainable technologies. And if I were to begin with some of the key technologies that are today at the forefront, I will start with the greenhouse gas emission effect. Not many of us may be aware, but when we enjoy the cool climates of an indoor building, it's the refrigerant which is causing this cooling. But the refrigerant in itself has a global warming potential which could be almost equivalent to 3,000 kgs of carbon dioxide for every kg of refrigerant. So when those refrigerants are let out into the atmosphere, the multiple times of global warming impact they have is really bad. So Honeywell worked on a technology which is called HFO, hydrofluoroolefins, which have a global warming potential of 1:1 to carbon dioxide, or maybe a slightly little more than that. What effectively we are trying to do is, and as as Apoorv mentioned, that when a building is constructed, it's constructed for many years. When a refrigeration and air conditioning system is put in, it's going to be there for 10, 15, 20 years. So if you put a polluting or a high global warming product today as a refrigerant in your system, even if you have a net zero goal of 2030, 2035, you will not achieve it because something sitting there is really polluting. So I think that's where Honeywell brings in technologies which help us think many years forward. We have technologies for upcycle of plastics. I think that's a favorite subject for you, sir. So Honeywell upcycle technology, and it kind of, problem with recycling of plastics is that, as Rinika also mentioned that, mentioned that, the quality degrades. So what do you do with the plastic? The next best option is upcycle it. Honeywell has upcycle technologies which help convert the plastic back into the base feed. And the base feed then can be converted to various petrochemical products and plastics back in the original form. And that's a really good way of doing the circular use of plastics. We have technologies around carbon capture. If you can't eliminate carbon emissions, you can at least capture. And when you capture, then you have technologies to transport them and to then dispose them through the sequestering into the ground. So Honeywell has proven 50 years track record in handling gases, and we bring in those technologies. Not only this, as companies strive towards sustainability goals, there has to be a baseline. How much am I polluting today? Unfortunately, most of the data today is statistical. Honeywell has technologies which let you measure these emissions on a real-time basis so that you really know where you are today, and then implement technologies and processes and systems to reduce them year on year to reach the actual net zero goal. So I believe, all in all, there are technologies that are being worked in multiple spheres. And as you know, in the previous panel, our co-panelists from Drive said that this requires even more focus from the industry to encourage new upcoming technologies. The real challenge is technology is made at lab scale, but commercialization becomes a big challenge. And I think that's where the industry has a responsibility to support such upcoming technologies and have more solutions.
Thank you. Rinika ji, how can businesses and governments collaborate to develop cross-sectoral initiatives that drive progress towards a zero-waste society? And can you share some examples?
So, I'll just reflect back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of overall, the three-pronged strategy in terms of filling the loop, closing the loop, and extending the loop. So just taking the conversation on from there, of course, it's a given that, you can't be working in silos. There is a requirement of partnership between the government, the producers, and also the communities. So when I talk about, and we were talking about the extended producer responsibility or the environmental protection, as you just rightly said, and you recorrected me for that. So when we're talking about that, and this legislation is very, very at a very nascent stage for the tire industry. So one thing is very clear, that the legislation is there, and one has to work, and this is something the tire industry is bearing the brunt. They're working with the government to kind of demystify what the legislation looks like at that level where it has to be compliant. The area where one needs to look at is what is the producer that they can, as a producer, what can you do as an organization? So as a corporate, we have taken a target or a commitment of using sustainable raw material in our production to increase it by 40% by 2030. And one of the critical areas we'll be looking at over there is the recycled content as well. And within the 40%, we're saying that a significant percentage has to be a recycled component. And that recycled component, where do you? So basically, when you get the tire, it's not just the tire rubber crumb, but also looking at other areas such as carbon black, because there are various raw materials that comprise in the tire. So very recently, we launched, and it's a pilot tire that we're looking at the moment, which is in the agri sector. 75% of that is sustainable raw material. and a significant percentage again, and obviously I can't give the composition over here because obviously still in the field phase of testing, but a significant percentage is from the recycle side as well. So that's something as an organization we're working towards overall to achieve the goal that we've put this aspiration for us. The other side, I mean, of course, there is the government. There is, and one of the biggest examples for a program that worked very well, I would say, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. I mean, and I say that because we worked from the CSR side. We've been working on that as well. So I mentioned to you about the consumer awareness and sensitization side of it. One big areas for us through our CSR programs that we're working on is solid waste management, and also alongside looking at for the communities creating playgrounds, play spaces with the tire crumb, the recycled tire crumb, which is from the end of life. So these are the areas we're working on, but in terms, and this is in partnership with the government, it goes hand in hand. But the most important thing is sensitization, which is small things like, you know, what you don't see over here, which is sourcing at, you know, segregation at source. And I mentioned, because when this kind of biodegradable waste, when it makes it to the landfills, it has methane, which is far more detrimental. So these are the things which we're working. In terms of sensitization, we are looking at within the communities. What we're looking at is getting the local resources from the communities to do the sensitization through our self-help groups. In our business, what we're looking at in terms of reverse logistics is how we can cascade this information through our dealer networks as well. Because when you talk about tires, not many people would say, oh, you know, I want to put the tire through a particular set of recycling process, because that doesn't come to you. So we're trying to dovetail all of this together to kind of have a program from the organization as well as the community side of area.
Thank you. We are running out of time. Any questions? Yeah, sorry. I don't see any questions. So, you know, last comments.
So I think so. There is very important point that we'll have to really look at. See, if it is a net zero goal, or you know, most of the companies, most of the cities are looking at net zero goals. If there are waste net zero goals, then where are the funds going to come from? Means nothing is going to come cheap, or nobody's going to invest proactively into it. So I don't know if I can really see that there, like we have a carbon pricing, can there be something like a waste pricing? So if that kind of a mechanism or that kind of a system could be worked out, this could be an innovative thought how we can leave the panel discussion to.
Thank you. Last 30 seconds
For
each speaker.
From the construction sector, I think one of the challenges that we've been seeing is around the world, this is something that we've been working on, is just to have better data tracking for where all the construction waste is going, especially because so much of it also comes from informal sectors. And only once that data capturing gets completed and recycling becomes more authorized and formalized, can we then start seeing supply chains for the rest of the material manufacturers sort out within this space. So that is again one of the key areas where we are focusing on at this point.
Hitesh ji, last.
I think I would like to extend my thoughts on the subject that we need to develop an ecosystem which has to work on a collaboration between the companies, the consumers, and the government. And very rightly said that there is cost attached to all of this. So until there are incentives and there are regulations, so very simply put, a carrot and a stick, you know, getting some of these to see the day of the light is going to be a challenge. We as Honeywell, as a responsible corporate citizen, are doing our job in bringing the technologies to the market. But I think at the same time, if our country has to progress to its own net zero goal, I think there is a lot of work that still needs to be done on the regulation and the policy making.
So what I can say, you know, we have all talked about technology and thing, but you know, we have forgotten the common man. So, you know, Margaret Mead, if I'm not wrong, she has said, never doubt a small group of thoughtful citizens. They can change us and they can help us to achieve a zero waste future. Thank you.